Welcome to the EnVibe Life Conversations podcast with Amy, Parker, and Cheryl Dunn. By tuning in, you are joining a community that will inspire you to increase balance, wellness, and joy in your life. We will offer expert information and insightful conversations to help us all on our journey to live more in vibe. For more information and articles, remember to also check out our website at envibelife.com. That's EnVibelife.com. We're grateful that you are here. Welcome to EnVibe Life Conversations with Amy, Parker, and Cheryl Dunn. And today we have a special guest, Dr. Lara Latimer. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
How are you?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. Laura is a life coach, but there's a lot more to you than that. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. I appreciate you punting to me. I do that a lot with guests in my class because I just learned like that kind of formality of introducing somebody else. Usually like the person themselves is kind of their own best expert. So I appreciate that. So thank you so much for having me. And primarily what I do is teach at UT, and my area is all things health related. I have an undergrad in kinesiology, and I have a master's and a PhD in health education and health behavior change. And so I'm in the College of Education at UT in this section of health behavior and health education. And so a lot of my training is in how do we make sustainable changes in our behavior. And so a lot of that, of course, informs my life coaching practice because people want to figure out ways to be more sustainably happy. And so we work together to figure out new perspectives and new skills so that people feel happier and more fulfilled longer, right? And then ideally, they could help other people feel that way as well. So I teach a couple of undergraduate classes and a graduate class. Usually that was the case this semester at least. And one of those classes in particular, I've been teaching now for about 7 years. And that is the overall approach with the class itself. The class is called Child and Adolescent Health, but we focus a lot on the students in my class, the college students who we might consider late adolescents themselves.
They probably don't, but we all do, right?
They do not. But science, because their brains aren't actually fully formed yet. So at least I can back my statements with that. But taking this approach that we're really focusing on them, a lot of them are future teachers, and that we can't really affect a child's health if we can't affect our own. So everything at this point in time looks like it's so nicely packaged and like I planned it all. I just gave a career and academic Q&A in my class yesterday, and I wanted to make it very clear that it has not been a seamless process and that that's okay. So, but that is my current professional status.
But you've had a journey that got you to where you are today, right? I mean, I think Cheryl and I both read some things about your bio and background and went, oh, she's lived very EnVibe, as we would put it, or you came to an EnVibe lifestyle. I think people, if you don't mind sharing, would love to hear a little bit about that too.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to acknowledge that I did meander a lot professionally, academically and professionally. So I got an undergraduate degree. Going back before that, I worked in a commercial gym, like a Gold's Gym type setting. Yeah. And so, of course, when that's all you've ever done, you think, well, I have to do that. Like this, I'll just own a gym. That will be, the end all be all. And I started college when I was 17 and kind of made a decision about my major based on that. And it's fine. It's turned out fine. I'm pretty thankful that I moved beyond that. I don't think that that's where I can do my best work. And after that, just really felt like I had to go to medical school. Like this was the only way to go. So I have gone down that track as well for a little while before I changed my mind again. You can see where this is going as far as helping my students in particular, but also my clients feel better about if they get to a point and they change their minds. As a society, we kind of look down upon that for some reason. And I don't really know why, although I did feel like that myself whenever I was in that position. I found my professional life at UT, and that was great. until I got to my postdoc. So when you want to be competitive for tenure track research positions at research institutions, it's best to do a postdoc fellowship and get more focused training on research. So I thought I had found my ticket to the life I wanted when I got accepted to do this postdoc at Cornell. And I went and I was miserable. I was completely miserable. And I see now that part of what informed that basically existential crisis that I had, this was in 2013, starting then, I see now that a lot of what happened starting in 2012 with some personal crises really started to change my perspective on life and inform a different way of seeing things. So I agree with how you phrased that, Amy. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but arrived at an EnVibe Life. I certainly didn't start there, but yeah, things started to change a lot there. And that's when I completely changed my career trajectory and started my coaching practice, and didn't actually know what I was going to do next professionally outside of that. And luckily teaching found me. So
what a gift you must be to those students to be able to share a message like that. Because, as a mother of two, one recent college graduate, one at UT right now, and one in high school, you're right. They're freaked out because they think, and so many of the colleges even, and I know we're digressing a little, but so many of the colleges, you have to apply to a certain major or a certain school or a certain program. And they're making these choices when they're 17 years old or even younger. My middle son started college barely 18 himself. And then they get there after a year or two and think, oh, I really don't like this at all. Even if they're good at it. Like, I don't want to do this and I don't like it. And then they have, the shame and the depression that comes from it. And it's a really hard situation. And, the thing is, my husband tells them all the time, people say life is short. It's not. Life is long. And you need to think about how you're living it.
Yeah.
Or the quality of what you put into it.
Exactly. And there's time to change directions. And yeah, I agree. It's probably a focus for a whole other podcast, but I just was listening to a podcast last night about these kind of similar things with the whole academic system that we've set up really sets up a lot of people for failure and that shame that you talked about. So
I would love to have another podcast on this. So let's put a pin in this and come back to it, even talking about the adolescents, because, I have a lot of friends who have kids the same age, and I've seen different versions, but of similar stories. But you come in though now and work also as a life coach for adults who might be finding themselves in that exact same situation and trying to find their purpose or refine their purpose. And what is everyone calling it? Like the Great Reset or the Great Resignation that happened during COVID? It's probably more prevalent now than ever before.
Yeah, it's exciting. I know not everybody feels that way. I think a lot of people who are faced with that kind of existential crisis are freaked out, right? They're like, I don't want this to happen. I thought I knew what I was doing and how it was going to work out, and now it's not. And I don't, it's not necessarily well received. And I think that's, to use a kind of a trite saying, it's like some of the best gifts in life come in the ugliest wrapping. It's like, that's definitely how I felt in my postdoc when everything changed. And I really started to get more comfortable with what my purpose was, and then have tried to learn more about that, talk to my students about that. Every client that I saw this week, we talked about that to some extent. Wow. So yes, it's part of who we are. I feel like it's part of why, finding meaning out of life is to figure out what our purpose is. So, I have some points that I think could maybe help with that. One is I'd like to bring up this idea that, do y'all know about Spanx?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So I don't know much about Spanx. I don't have a personal tie to this brand. However, I have one.
Well, you're lucky.
You're lucky.
Not that I couldn't probably benefit from some Spanx, but I just haven't gone there yet. There's time. And I've become more familiar with Sarah Blakely, the owner of that company lately. And I watched her. Are y'all familiar with Masterclass?
Yeah.
Okay. So I watched her whole masterclass, and she talks about this graphic that I now revisit frequently of these kind of like a Venn diagram, essentially, okay, of these 3 circles. So they're overlapping in one section. One circle is, and this is all about finding your purpose. So one circle is the things that you're good at, acknowledging the things that you're good at. The other circle is acknowledging the things that bring you joy, the things that really make you happy, right? And would we necessarily consider ourselves good at those things? I do there's a certain kind of art that I do. I don't know if it's art for other people's standards, but I love it, right? It brings me joy. I may be better at some other things. That's fine. And then the third circle is what breaks your heart or / how you want to serve the world. And so if we can kind of think about where all of those 3 circles come together, that's our purpose. One way to approach it.
That's
in order
great.
to,
Yeah,
I'm really loving that. I shared it with my class. I've talked to my clients about it. Like I said, I revisit that frequently. But
and can we link a copy of that diagram or something like that in the show notes?
I think I'll just give you the photo, which is actually a drawing of my own.
Okay.
Rudimentary, but that's the only access I have to it. And I can give you that, and you can totally put it in the show notes, and maybe that will be helpful to somebody. I think.
Yes, it will be.
Well, I think what's important to acknowledge is that in each of those circles, like, those are pretty big questions, right? Like, what are you good at? What brings you joy? How do you want to serve the world? Like, that's kind of a big question. So when we think about practical ways, a big part of my coaching is every one of my clients, if they want, which they do, all of them want this, they leave with a practical step, right? We don't just talk about abstract things and then keep doing that, right? We talk about practical things. So I think it's important to talk about practical ways to get to how we can fill out our circles for this purpose diagram. And we need to, in order to do that, we need to get still. We need to get still, right? Which is it's icky for some people. Like, they don't want to do that. I just had a discussion with a client this week who is like, when I see an impending weekend without anything scheduled, I get freaked. I'm freaked out. So
wow. That's so crazy and interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because when I see a day with too many things scheduled,
that freaks me out.
I get freaked out.
Exactly.
Sometimes when I have a day or a weekend with nothing, I'm like, oh, I'm so happy. Yeah.
So do you think that y'all have you might have different answers, but have you always felt like that, where you were loving the free space and, nervous about the packed schedule?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
No.
I've always needed a fair amount of calm time, but I think, yes, I probably used to.
I think as I got older, I realized how important that calm time was to feed me, where when I was younger, I was like, you can do it, push through it all, have your plans all weekend and work all week. Where now that I'm older, I'm like, if I don't stop and take a breath, my children and my husband are going to strangle me because I'm not a nice person when that comes, Yeah. Yes, I just messed that up.
Agreed. I feel like I connect with my clients a lot because I hated the free space. It's been several years now since I really felt like that. Again, a lot of my change coincides starting in 2010 and then very significantly starting in 2013, I would say. So it's been a while now, but I definitely remember the times where it was almost like a badge of honor to be that busy.
I think some people still feel that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I talk to them a lot. And so I think it's, I get it. I've been there, and I also know how unhappy I was and how disconnected I really was from my true self and my true purpose and my own values and the things that I liked, because I was so focused on kind of like a surface level checking of the box things, which is very common, right? We're told if we, do certain things, go to school, get a degree, have some sort of socially acceptable career, get married, buy a house, have kids, then you'll be happy. And as you start to go through life and you check off those boxes and you realize you're not necessarily happier, it can feel like a crisis. And so in this getting still, I think we need to do some writing, some journaling about what do I really like? And it's hard. I mean, seriously, again, all of the clients that I talked to this week about this, they're all at different phases, but they're realizing I don't really know what I like. Or they can maybe name like 2 things, but they're not even regularly doing those 2 things necessarily, very disconnected from what they even like because they've been trying to follow somebody else's program. So
I bet that's super common.
I think so. Well, I know and I spend a lot of time in stillness and I spend a lot of time meditating and journaling and all of the above.
Hard.
And like Cheryl knows this, I'm a big manifestation person, I guess. But the biggest step is really getting clear on what your desires are, what your true desires are in order to bring them into your life.
Right. It's really hard to do that when we're like busy trying to manage impressions, what we think other people think we should be like. That keeps us very wrapped up in not figuring out, what we really want. So, so getting still, writing about these things, you got to have that space to have some creativity for sure to figure out what your true desires are and your values. And then be bold. Being bold, going out on a limb. And the way that I like to phrase this, especially because a lot of the people that I talk to in my coaching practice are, I would say, overly concerned and driven by logic and not as much by like our feeling selves. And so this is where we tap into that because we need both, right? We need to be skillful about using both of them, but, to go out on a limb and gather some information, right? Try to look at it as neutrally as possible like that you're going to try something so that you can get information, right? Not so that you can never have to feel bad again or never have to put yourself out there again. Like really look at what is the purpose of being bold and going out on a limb. And I would say like gather information.
Wow. That's big. That's a big step, I think in order to be bold, you have to be still first, because if you're just on the hamster wheel, boldness doesn't seem like, that's a jumping off the wheel.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Great visual of that. So so that's kind of how I feel like, that's a good mix of some kind of abstract and some real practical ways of looking at ways we can find our purpose as a way to feel more fulfilled. Whatever that means, it's a really personal thing to figure that out. So
as much work as I do on finding my purpose and listening to my inner guidance and outer guidance as well, I guess, or other than guidance, something I do still have a really hard time with is regrets, especially regrets for squandered time. And I think as you reach certain milestone birthdays, 40 years, 50 years old, things like that, it's probably pretty common. I know it has been a big theme for me. What do you say to people who are dealing so I have my purpose. Now I see what my purpose is or should have been, or I wish it were. Man, I wasted a lot of time.
Yeah. I know. I'm glad you brought up the birthday thing. That resonates with me. So I just in September had my 40th birthday, and I remember distinctly my 30th birthday. And it was such a dramatic comparison to how I felt on those 2 milestone birthdays. On my 30th birthday, I was almost done with my PhD program. And I remember somebody asking me at my birthday, like, so how does it feel to be 30? How are you feeling? And I was like, I feel kind of disappointed in myself. Like I felt like I would have done more by now.
Wow.
When I look back on that, I'm like, that is so harsh. It's so harsh. There's no room for the goodness there. Right. I was very hard on myself. The inner critic was very loud. On my 40th birthday, I have no complaints. I had no regrets. I had no feeling of lost time or, like you're describing. But I have before, right? Like I understand, again, that's just come out of the womb, magically having no regrets. So I think when I think about regret and, why we have them, to me, it's an issue of expectations. We expected something to look a certain way, and then it didn't look that way, right? Our experience didn't measure up to our expectations. I really discovered this in that postdoc experience that I was talking to you about, where I was like, what the heck is happening here? This was supposed to be something, right? I had listed all these things. It was supposed to be for me, bring me, whatever. And it was none of those things. And I remember getting so frustrated and the light bulb going off one day. Talk about getting still. I did a lot of getting still in that year that I spent in upstate New York alone in the worst winter that they had in over 50 years, right? Like there's a lot of thinking time. And so I remember the light bulb going off and I was like, oh, it's because you expected it to be a certain way. Had you had different expectations, you might not be disappointed right now. You might not feel like you're wasting time, et cetera. So, and this, of course, leads into this idea of the shoulds. I'm sure that you see this theme where we say, well, I should have done this, or somebody else should have done this or should not have done this. And I think this is where I really tap into my spirituality, which again, came more to the surface in those 2012 to 2014 years. I was raised in a fundamentalist, Southern Baptist type environment.
Yep.
Repair, in my opinion, there's some repair that needs to be done after doing that. And I really was like, don't talk to me about religion, get out of my face about it. I will never be like, I was very anti for a while, starting kind of like middle high school. And then until some seeds were planted, definitely before this 2012, 2013. But, I realized like there is a way for me to have spirituality in my life, and it doesn't have to look the way that I had been exposed to before. And that's when that really came to help me. So in that, recognizing that and really trying to believe, so this can be baby steps to get into this belief, I think, but that life is a mystery that's unfolding before us, not something that we need to solve or figure out or man or woman handle, right? Like we don't need to fix and contrive and, we can just see how it unfolds.
I think this should be one of our Soulful Sunday quotes. Every Sunday we put out a quote on social media. We call it Soulful Sunday. And I think life is a mystery that is unfolding before you or something like that. That's beautiful.
Awesome. It doesn't need to be figured out. It doesn't need to be controlled. It's what you just said is so powerful. It's just such a great message. And it goes along with, if we release our expectations of anything, whether it's your career or a person or whatever, release your expectations and just live in what is and go from there. That is super hard to do, but I think it would help with a lot of discomfort, unhappiness, anger, if you release your expectations.
Right. Like
that's hard.
It is very hard. And again, when we think about practical steps to doing this, my meditation practice specifically is a major part of it. Most of it is sitting and observing my thoughts as neutrally as I can, and then moving on with my day. And when we do that, we start to realize how arbitrary so many of our thoughts are. And it's also arbitrary which of those we choose to impose meaning on. Like we're creating it all ourselves, right? Like I can decide to put meaning on this thing over here or this thing over here. But so much of the time when we're not in practice with meditation, or just because we're human, because we're not robots, right? We forget that. And we believe our thoughts too much. We think if we have this thought, like, shouldn't have wasted that time. I can't believe I wasted that time. We think that that's true. And we can challenge those. We can say, that's not really helpful. I'm not going to believe that one. I'm going to leave that one. Something to that extent. So
So is meditation and mindfulness another skill you help your clients navigate?
Yes. And I've found, it's very interesting. I've found in my discussions and my students, everything is connected, right? Like, in fact, if you want another quote, everything is connected. Everything changes. Pay attention. It's a quote on the wall at the Zen Buddhist Center here in Austin that a friend told me about. And I love it. So there's all the themes cross over, but yes, we talk a lot about meditation in my coaching practice. And I've found that I dispel a lot of myths for people about what meditation is. And that's exciting because, again, I was pretty openly anti-meditation actually for a long time, where people would be like, hey, you're like real high strung. Like, could you make you thought about maybe some meditation for stress relief? And I was just like, no, that is not for me. And so it's fun to be able to share, practical ways that people could try it. And then, they see for themselves how it can help.
I love it. This is so good.
We're all about this here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. So we've already covered a lot, but I can't resist asking you about, because of the time of year that we're talking. This podcast will probably air right around the first of the year, right around January 1st. And we're bombarded with thoughts of resolutions. And it is a natural time to do some reflection and introspection. And we hear about New Year's resolutions. We talk about setting intentions. Mm-hmm. Can you give people advice on that? Going into a new year, setting intentions, maybe aligning more with their life's purpose, and what can they do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really like the phrases that you use. I understand you're connecting it to our kind of traditional resolution, but I really feel like it's more helpful when we can say kind of the introspection and the intention and things like that. I would say, something that's really important, that we haven't really touched on yet, but of course is a theme throughout all of this, is when we can get still and we start to figure out, the thoughts that we're believing and, what our true purpose is and all of those things. It's really important to check in about our self-worth, how we feel about ourselves. Most of us, all of us need some help with that for a variety of reasons. It could be from our childhood stuff. It could be from societal conditioning. Like, we need some help with that. And so I think that goes along with the topics that we talked about before. I think it also helps us decide better how we can set some intentions for a new year when we are overly concerned with how we think we should be. That is usually a pretty good indicator that we're not in touch with our true self-worth. And then we set intentions and goals that are maybe misaligned with our true values and purpose. So I think that's really important. It's uncomfortable for some people to acknowledge that, because it does kind of require that we go back. And I like to call it the ratty old suitcase that we're dragging along behind us, of just I'll just say my own stuff, like the boy in 5th grade that told me my arms were fat, like, the 2nd grade.
We
teacher.
all knew that boy, right?
Yeah. I still know that boy.
Same thing to us.
Yes, exactly. The 2nd grade teacher that told me I needed to lighten up, like, get rid of that, but in a way that is very, again, to use the word skillful, like, because sometimes I think we have gotten rid of it, but what we've done is just shoved it in a suitcase or in the closet, right? So really bringing that out and then examining it in a way that allows us to process it and move on, rather than just saying, I'm not going to let that affect me anymore, when we haven't actually processed it. So I think if we can do that, we are better in touch with our self-worth, and we can choose intentions that are more in alignment with that. Of course, all of the things I mentioned earlier about the journaling and the getting still and those things. I would say one thing that's really important, again, with a practical kind of a tip for this, start now. Do it now. I do not like this January 1st stuff, or even December 31st stuff, or wait until February, right? Like eliminate this pressure that we put on ourselves, because it is a good time. And in some ways it's a natural time. And in some ways it's totally arbitrary. We can do this at any point in time, right? Like we don't have to wait. So I think
I totally agree with that. But I also, as we've been sitting here talking about it, I think it's also, if you can make that time for yourself as part of your holiday tradition, then all of that craziness and overscheduling of the holidays, you're putting your self-importance into the middle of also. And there's something really beautiful about that if you can manage it.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. I think, depending on when people are listening to this, right? Like they could, when we say start now, that could be before the holidays for them, right? So they're really learning how to incorporate that before all of the holiday crazy starts, so that they can make different decisions about how they pack their calendars or not.
Mm-hmm. So, but I also, what I kind of heard you say too, is give yourself the permission that if it's too much for you to do at a certain time of year, don't do it. Wait till next month when it's not so crazy. Whatever works.
And just like sometimes, I feel like sometimes when I maybe start a new eating plan, it's because I've had too much of bad things. And I say, I just don't feel good anymore. And it's just time. And like today's the day because I want to feel better. That might be the cue also.
I agree. And I feel like ideally we would be doing that year round, right? Like we have plenty of data on New Year's, whatever we want to call them. It doesn't really matter. We know that people, they want to do these things and then they don't. And so I wonder sometimes if we can take that kind of unnecessary pressure off of it, if we would see some more sustainable change for that. Yeah. So I agree. Taking that, like, every day is a new day kind of approach year round, rather than just like, I got to do it on January 1st, all the pressure we put on ourselves to do that.
Well, and we also don't, give yourself a lot of grace. Because, just having an intention is beautiful. Don't judge yourself if you don't get to a certain end goal by the time you thought you might get to a certain end goal. In fact, maybe the introspection and setting the intention was the whole exercise for your development and not even the completion of it.
Right. It's that life mystery unfolding thing.
Exactly.
Again, we don't know if we're going to reach our goal or if, like you said, Amy, the whole goal was just thinking about it then. And my intentions, I feel like most years or times when I set intentions are a lot about, like, the intention itself is a lot about introspection. It's a lot about focusing on myself, self-compassion, getting back to the firmest foundation I can find. I recognize that life it's just ebbs and flows constantly. But so I kind of have some more general intentions that I'm revisiting all the time. And that's the general theme of them, which I also find really helpful.
Oh, that's really great. Lara, this has been very helpful. All your information is so, as we say here, EnVibe.
Yes.
It's great tips that people need to hear. They need to hear, even if you can only retain a little bit of what you put out there, because you gave us a wealth of information, but just a little bit here and there, and just, taking some of the advice or the pointers, or even the little diagram that you described with the 3 circles. Any of this is a great step to, I think, finding your purpose, finding your joy, unpacking that suitcase that's ratty and that you're dragging around. I love all of those analogies. It's good. It's great to have that any time of year to help you find a little more joy.
And we'll also link this in the show notes, but if someone's interested in working with you, they can find you at www.laralatimer.com, I believe, which will be linked. And I think, we might all, I love when you said everyone can use a little help or a little support in this journey.
It's true. It's very true. And I think, some of the things that we've talked about, people will have heard before, and yet it is so important for us to hear them over and over again and to revisit them. And it's okay if we've heard them before and we're like, I knew that. I knew I should do that. Or that's okay, right?
One story I like to tell is, I'm sure you know who Gary Zukav is, right? And his original book, and I'm terrible at titles, don't even remember the name. I probably had it on a shelf for at least 10 years before I read it.
Yes.
And I think I'd opened it, and I have several books, opened it, put it back, opened it, put it back.
Yeah.
And then the day I was ready for it, I think I read it nonstop for 3 days before I ever put it down. And it was life-changing for me. So just like that, even if you've heard some of these things before, maybe today's the day, or maybe it needs to go back somewhere in the coffers of your consciousness and it'll come to the forefront when you are ready for it. So that's okay too.
Completely agree. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been lovely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
It's been great. And I'm sure we will have you again.
Yes.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining our conversation today. For more information or to learn more about EnVibe Life, we hope you'll visit us at www.envibelife.com. You can find links and show notes for this episode on our podcast page. Please like, follow, and leave a review for our podcast. We hope that you will listen again soon.